unconscious bias simply means that we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. Because as human beings, we all have these preconceived ideas and judgments and biases for how we see the world. And this is a challenge for leaders because it makes us reflexively pigeonhole our business, and it actually thwarts the very same innovation that all of you agree is imperative, right? And we saw this in some of the cases that we explored earlier. The fascinating thing is that the same is true for how we treat our people, right? Our reality is shaped by our beliefs. Our beliefs are shaped by our experiences, by what people tell us, by what history tells us. This is the way I've always known it to be, so I assume that this is the only way it could be. And I want to walk you through why this happens, what's happening in the brain when our biases are activated. So from an evolutionary perspective, the brain, as you might know, has evolved to help us survive, right? As an individual and as a species. So the survival mechanism of the brain is the fundamental function of the brain. So the brain is constantly scanning. In fact, every 7 seconds, your brain is scanning for a threat. And what has happened is the human brain has evolved to leverage quick responses or shortcuts to help us enhance our survival, right? However, it's important to note that these biases are not innate. They are learned, and they're shaped really early in our development through social interactions, through the conversations that we've had with our family, through the programs that we watch on television, the books that we've read. And what research has shown is that implicit biases trigger responses in the amygdala. And this is where people with more implicit bias actually show increased amygdala activation in response to biased categories, right? And so basically, let me translate this. Our minds like to put people, objects, and ideas into boxes. These are neat, orderly containers that we can understand in an instant, right? And so it does this to be efficient. You are going to be mind blown when you hear this. Every single moment of every single day, every second, we are processing 11 million bits of information. And here is the alarming thing. Our brain is only capable of processing 40 bits consciously, right? 40 versus 11 million bits. So the delta between these two, a 99.99999 something percent, is processed unconsciously. And this is where our biases live. They are unconscious shortcuts or heuristics that operate in our brains unconsciously to support our survival. Listen, life would be completely overwhelming if we didn't organize and label, right? So our biases have a function. You would not get anything done. Imagine every single time you saw a person, right? You walk into your house and you see your family and your brain had to stop and say, wait, do I know you? Have we met before? So our brain categorizes people and information so that we can be more effective in navigating the reality of everyday life. What I'm basically saying here is that our experiences, the information, the people, the circumstances that we are exposed to become input sources into our mind code, right? This mind code, heuristics, algorithms that are registered in the brain, they express themselves as unconscious bias, which is simply that our interpretation of reality. So do you believe that to be true? I want us to explore this notion that our experience is simply an interpretation of reality. Let's take a look. I'm going to show you an object on the next screen. And what I want you to do is to tell me whether this object is moving clockwise or counterclockwise. So let me start and just take a couple seconds, look at this object, and then go into the chat and write your answer, whether it's moving clockwise or counterclockwise. Let's take a look. Navigating to the chat box here. Let's see. Elizabeth says counter. Jerome says counter, but Caddy says clockwise. Sonia says counterclockwise, but Jonathan says clockwise. Ashley says counter. Judy says counter, but Suzette says clockwise. Taylor says counter. Alma says counter. Jason says clockwise. And Raymond says, I can't tell. So neither. It's just spinning. Both. It's alternating. Ah, Dana. Yes. Lynn says it keeps changing. So this, my friends, is an optical illusion. There is no right answer here. You actually have the ability to see the cat spinning in both directions. So what I want you to do, if you're seeing it moving clockwise, see if you can reverse to make it go counterclockwise. And the opposite as well. If you're seeing counterclockwise, see if you can get it to go clockwise. Take a couple seconds to experiment and let me know if you're able to see the direction change. Beth says, that's just one dizzy cat. I agree with you. Yashina says, yes, I see him change. Kent says, yep. Suzette says, this is cool. I know, right? By the way, you can find this on YouTube and have your family and friends do this. Taylor says, I just found the change. Taylor, how were you able to find that change? If you were successful in shifting the direction, how were you able to do it? Yeah, Jonathan says, can you send this illusion to our emails? You can actually YouTube spinning cat optical illusion and it will come up. I can't get it to change. I know it's frustrating. I'm going to stop it because if I don't, then you guys are going to keep getting distracted by trying to get the cat to change. So this is an optical illusion, right? And what it points out for us is the ability for us to actually take perspective, right? To shift. And the trick here is that when you're looking at the cat, right? If you just keep staring at it at the same point, you're not going to be able to make it shift. You have to look away, come back, or maybe find a different angle of looking at it in order for it to move, right? And so what this speaks to is the concept of a beginner's mind, taking a fresh perspective, seeing something new as if you hadn't seen it before. Instead of getting locked into one view, by taking perspective, you can actually see the shift. And so on one hand, we can see how unconscious bias, this ability to see people and the world as we are, is very efficient and it actually allows us to be more effective. But on the other hand, it also means that our experiences of people and the world is also limited unless we can cultivate a beginner's mind, right? Which is on the other end of the bias spectrum. Beginner's mind is an open mind. It's seeing the world with fresh eyes. It's waking up in the morning and questioning everything about your business, questioning everything about your world, not assuming that it's the same as you've always seen it. Have you ever had a friend or a family member who you spend a lot of time with and you don't notice that they've cut their hair, that they've colored their hair, that they've gained or lost weight? They have gained or lost weight. They have cut or colored their hair, but you don't see it because you see them as you always do, right? You don't see them with the newness of what has changed. Happens all the time, right? And so in the words of the famous Zen master, Shunryu Suzuki, he says, in a beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in an expert's mind, there are few. And so if you self-identify as an expert, chances are you're seeing your world, you're seeing your business, you're seeing your challenges as they always have been, and you're cutting yourself off of seeing the possibilities. And so allow yourself to take perspective, to see things from a new angle. The good news here is that from a brain science perspective, research has shown that we can change, right? While our biases may actually be hardwired in the brain is flexible enough through a process of neuroplasticity to actually unlearn and relearn different implicit biases. Essentially, we can reprogram the brain, right? And we can take more of a top-down approach. Our biases live in the red part of the brain, right? And we see from research that this section of the brain, the amygdala, is where our implicit biases live. And if we don't activate our prefrontal cortex and train the brain to function from that specific part of the brain, then we're constantly going to be operating from the amygdala, but we can train this top-down effect because we know that biases are learned and are shaped by our experiences. And the brain is flexible enough, but it requires that we have an awareness of the bias. We have to have an awareness, we have to have a desire to change, and a willingness to take the action to rewire and reprogram the biases. And what the research has confirmed is that the practice of mindfulness actually reduces inherent biases so that we can not only see more clearly, we can also imagine new possibilities, whether those possibilities are about the business or even the people that we work with. And so what we found, which is really compelling, is that people who practice mindfulness are less biased, they are more inclusive, they're less discriminatory, and they're also more innovative. In fact, I read a research article recently that confirmed that cultivating inclusive leadership, you are building the same skills that are also required for innovative leadership. So you can focus on those same competencies and achieve two very important outcomes, right? And there's also another research by two guys out of Central Michigan University that have shown that people who listen to a 10-minute recording every day, encouraging them to focus on their bodily sensations and their thoughts without judgment, actually showed less implicit bias based on race, based on age, and subsequent implicit associations tasks. So the research is supporting this.